Let's go back to 216 BC. Picture the dusty, sun-baked plains of Cannae. An invading Carthaginian warlord is standing on Italian soil, and he's about to orchestrate an absolute historical nightmare. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to break down exactly how Hannibal Barca unleashed a tactical masterpiece that literally annihilated the largest army the Roman Republic had ever fielded. We're focusing on exactly how Hannibal's trap crushed Rome. So let's dive right in, because this isn't just a story about a battle. It's a masterclass in how an underdog can take an enemy's own strength and use it to utterly destroy them. To really wrap our heads around the sheer brilliance of Hannibal's trap, we have to look at the terrifying strategic reality Rome was facing at the time. The Second Punic War is raging, and the Roman Republic, well, they are in a state of absolute panic. Hannibal had already pulled off the impossible. He literally marched an invading army over the treacherous Alps and right into the heart of Italy. And if that wasn't terrifying enough, he just handed the Romans two incredibly bloody, completely humiliating defeats on their own home turf. The Republic was facing its darkest hour, no question about it. So, deciding they were absolutely done playing games, the Roman Senate takes a drastic step. They raise a colossal army. We're talking about roughly 80,000 men. Just to put that into perspective, that's enough soldiers to pack a massive modern football stadium, and it was the absolute largest force Rome had ever put into the field up to this point in their entire history. The mindset in the Senate was actually pretty simple. End this war for good. They were going to take this massive numerical advantage and just steamroll Hannibal into the dust. Okay, let's look at the strategic chessboard here. This massive Roman war machine marches south, making a beeline straight for a crucial supply depot known as Cannae. Their goal is blunt and honestly brutal. Find the invaders, leverage those overwhelming numbers, and crush them. But waiting for them at Cannae is Hannibal, commanding a mixed army that's only about half the size of Rome's colossal force. So on paper, Rome has already won. But as you'll see, grand strategy is rarely decided just on paper. All right, part 1, setting the bait. Let's see how Hannibal prepared the ground for this trap. You see, there was a stark contrast in tactical philosophies on that hot, dusty morning. The Roman commanders had a super straightforward plan. They packed their heavy legionaries tightly together, right in the center. Basically, they wanted to create a massive, heavily armored battering ram to smash through the Carthaginian lines using sheer brute force. But Hannibal's strategy? Complete battlefield manipulation. He anticipated exactly what Rome was going to do. So instead of a traditional straight defensive line, he went with a highly unusual crescent formation. Let's break down Hannibal's genius here layer by layer, because he is literally designing the perfect trap right in front of the Romans' eyes. First, he deploys that crescent formation so it actually bulges outward, pointing directly toward the advancing Roman army. Second, and this is incredibly counterintuitive, right? He takes his least reliable troops, his Gauls and Spaniards, and places them right in the center of that outward bulge. The tip of his spear is effectively his weakest link. But here's the kicker, step 3. He takes his elite, battle-hardened African infantry and positions them on the far left and right edges of his line, hiding them way back in deep column formations. He is offering Rome a very specific, incredibly tempting piece of bait. Which leads us to part 2. The Roman battering ram takes the bait. The heavy legionaries are ordered to advance. And part 3, closing the jaws. Here's where the trap actually triggers, and it is a masterpiece of battlefield engineering. So, the Romans charge forward, right? They slam violently into the center of the Carthaginian crescent, right into those exact unreliable troops Hannibal deliberately placed there. And just as Hannibal planned, under the staggering weight of 80,000 Romans, his center slowly begins to buckle. It starts giving ground. Now the Romans are absolutely convinced they're winning the day. They push eagerly forward, rushing deeper and deeper into that collapsing center. But here's the terrifying reality. Because the Carthaginian lines are bowing inward, the advancing Roman soldiers begin to compress themselves into a tighter and tighter mob. They are completely blinding themselves with their own momentum. Then it happens. As the Carthaginian center bows inward, kind of like a giant net catching a fish, those elite African troops, hidden in deep columns on the flanks, suddenly wheel inward. Bam! They crash violently into the Romans on both sides. That unstoppable Roman battering ram. It is suddenly stopped dead in its tracks, caught completely in a crushing vice of enemy infantry. And then, the final jaw of the trap snaps shut. Earlier in the battle, Hannibal's heavy cavalry, led by his brilliant commander Hasdrubal, had completely routed the Roman horsemen. But instead of endlessly chasing the fleeing Romans off the battlefield, the Carthaginian cavalry does something absolutely devastating. They sweep back around, charging directly into the exposed rear of that tightly packed Roman infantry. The trap is officially sprung. Hannibal has achieved a flawless double-envelopment. If you're not familiar with the term, that's a military maneuver where both flanks of an enemy force, and in this case the rear as well, are attacked simultaneously, resulting in a complete surrounding. Rome's massive, invincible battering ram, that colossal army they swore would end the war, is entirely immobilized. They're completely surrounded by a force half their size. Part 4. An unimaginable slaughter. What follows is a descent into absolute claustrophobic horror, an event that became a true geopolitical earthquake. The numbers from this single day of fighting are honestly difficult to process. By the time the sun set, an estimated 50 to 70,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the fields of Cannae. 50 to 70,000. This staggering death toll included a Roman consul and dozens of senators. The Republic was thrown into a state of sheer unadulterated terror. The army that was meant to save them had essentially been erased from existence. Ancient survivor accounts paint a remarkably grim picture of what it was actually like inside that double envelopment. The Romans were compressed so tightly together in the center of the encirclement, thanks entirely to their own earlier forward momentum, that many couldn't even raise their swords to defend themselves. It was just a scene of absolute carnage. Exhausted, terrified men couldn't flee, they couldn't fight, they simply had to stand there, literally shoulder to shoulder, waiting for hours for their turn to die. Finally, Part 5. The ultimate tactical lesson. How did Hannibal achieve the impossible, and what can we learn from it? The crucial takeaway here is this. Hannibal achieved his masterpiece by perfectly weaponizing Rome's own aggression. He took their desperate desire to crush him, their total reliance on a heavy battering ram, and he turned it entirely against them. It's a stunning, almost scary reminder that in grand strategy, sheer brute force and numerical superiority can actually become a fatal weakness if your opponent knows how to exploit it. Psychological manipulation, anticipating your enemy's ego, and dictating control of the terrain, that will almost always triumph over just throwing bodies at a problem. There's a reason Cannae is still taught in military academies across the world today. Human nature just doesn't change. The desire to rely on overwhelming strength while totally ignoring strategic foresight is a trap leaders still fall into right now. Which leaves us with this final thought to consider. When you look at the geopolitical conflicts, the massive corporate battles, or even the political maneuvers of today, how does the art of using an enemy's own momentum against them continue to shape grand strategy in our modern world?